Thank you for joining us today. I'm Stacy Holmes, one of the HMIS System Administrators here in King County.
Hi, I'm Danielle Robert. I work with BitFocus here doing HMIS.
So the agenda today, we obviously are focused on rapid rehousing and its relationship in HMIS. There are specific standards and policies that we want to make sure to go over. Very specific focus on HMIS. As questions come up, and if questions come up around policies and procedures that Danielle and I can't answer because it's not our purview to answer it, we'll just direct folks to the funders that are involved in funding your agencies around rapid rehousing and to other resources that we're aware of. So why does this matter? Why do we spend time out of the day talking about HMIS specifically around rapid rehousing? Obviously, we have lots of different types of projects that participate in HMIS. Your agencies have a lot of different programs that may or may not participate in HMIS at all. But because we have some specific funded initiatives around rapid rehousing here in King County, and because we have some very specific data standards that control HMIS, we want to make sure to talk about both of those in the same context of the same training. HMIS, just for those of you who maybe are new to using HMIS or thinking about it in the context of rapid rehousing, because we have all levels of attendees at our trainings. We're a continuum-wide HMIS system, so all the agencies who participate in HMIS share the same client profiles and then add their enrollments and services underneath those client profiles in the system. We currently have about 55 rapid rehousing projects participating in HMIS. We very well may have more throughout the continuum, and then our team waits to hear and gets requests from funders and agencies when like a new contract gets signed or new funding source becomes available, that when they need to start receiving referrals from coordinated entry or entering their data according to their contracts, they'll reach out to us, we'll get that set up, we'll communicate with the HMIS lead at your agency, because we always have one identified person at your agency who is in that role. Obviously, because it is the HMIS system, it has to adhere to federal standards, even if your agency isn't funded by HUD. HUD controls the HMIS data standards and the policies that we need to adhere to. And we also have some local funder requirements that we need to adhere to, or some local fields that for almost everything, I could refer you to the federal data standards to look to see how a particular field should be entered or what's the definition. There's a few fields where that's not the case, and we can point some of those out to you. Then obviously participating in the HMIS system and having the rapid rehousing programs in there, in addition to the data entry requirements of adding enrollments and services so that you see a full client's history and your program is able to show outcomes and demographics, it is part of the coordinated entry process. So there's functionality within Clarity Human Services that has some referral functionality to allow coordinated entry to refer to programs and for you to receive those referrals. Danielle will go over those soon, and we'll sort of start to dig into the how-to as we sort of talk about that how-to process in the context of rapid rehousing. The other reason why it's important is because it tells the story in our community about how rapid rehousing is serving folks experiencing homelessness. And so these public dashboards that All Home, the lead of entity for the continuum of care, that they put out on their website, and that we then, that the media uses a lot, that tells the story of how providers are supporting people experiencing homelessness. All that data comes from HMIS. So the data that we're talking about, the data standards, the policies and procedures, that all feeds into then how the story gets told to the public, to the media, how contract monitors are looking at programs, how funders are looking at programs. So it's all part of this landscape. So I am very sensitive to the fact that a lot of agencies have more than one database that they have to enter into. HMIS, I know, is one of them. That's why I want to sort of highlight the fact that this is one of the key pieces of how our community story is getting told across the continuum of care is through this data that's in HMIS. Are there any questions about sort of the general context and policies? We'll dig in a little bit more to data standards and to the how-to as we walk through some of the slides that Danielle is going to walk us through. Before we get into some of the how-to, I'll dig in just another layer, and I assume that there may be questions that come up around situations that you're dealing with, and so we will have time for lots of questions throughout. Like all shelter and housing programs, not all, the majority of the shelter and housing programs that are funded by City of Seattle, King County, HUD, some of the other funders, United Way and Building Changes, that rapid rehousing programs are required to participate. The enrollment data elements, when we're talking about HMIS data standards, we're talking about those things that those of you who already do enrollments may be familiar with. So the living situation data elements, the income and benefits data elements, the move-in date, which we're going to talk about a lot today because move-in date is a big issue in the rapid rehousing enrollments. The jurisdiction and city data elements that are on those screens that you all fill out, those are local. So those you would not find in the HMIS data standards dictionary or manual. Those were decided upon through a committee process across the funders. The media and funders are looking at this jurisdiction and city data very closely. So you're going to hear us talk about that a lot more. These are relatively new. For those of you who've been around, these got rolled out last summer. And those are the fields that show up when you are entering move-in dates, when you're saying where somebody last had stable housing, when you're exiting them to permanent destination. Sort of there's some fields that show up that say, what are the, what's the city, and if it's not a city, what's the jurisdiction, or are they going out of state? Those fields. I will pause and say that any of the hyperlinks that are in these slides, they will work as regular links when we send those out to you as PDFs afterwards. So, and if you Googled HUD HMIS data standards, you would find them immediately. The project enrollments also indicate, so when we're counting things in HMIS, there's certainly we're counting clients in the sense of, demographics and who people are, but the things that get counted are these enrollments, right? And so, and these enrollments are what are indicating how, who's serving that client, how they're getting served within that program. For rapid rehousing, it's indicating, have they moved in someplace yet? The data standards from HUD are very clear that an enrollment indicates these things that are in here, that there's somehow assistance available, that there's an assumption you're enrolling this client because they're eligible, and there's assistance available either now or very soon. For rapid rehousing, it doesn't mean that there's an apartment available right now, but that there is a subsidy that is available to be used. And that obviously this client is able to access services within your program. So for HUD and the definitions, that's what the criteria is for an enrollment, it's project start date. There's also this new kind of project that is getting funded over the last couple of years. We're getting more and more guidance from HUD. And so I want to mention it here, and I want it to be in the slides. And not a lot of, we don't have a lot of these in our community yet. We have some, these joint component project types. So this is where the funding source has both crisis housing, and so this is in the form of what is in HMIS as transitional housing, and it has rapid rehousing. And there's very specific data requirements for the projects that are have that funding source. So I want to mention it, because if your agency all of a sudden gets a joint component project type, and you're serving this client with transitional housing and rapid rehousing, HUD has some current and we all know that this could change, HUD has some very specific guidance that shows different scenarios that they would imagine that represent parallel enrollments for a client. So a client would have an enrollment in a transitional housing project, and at the same time, with the same start date, an enrollment in a rapid rehousing project. And you would see those happening at the same time. I know in the room, we have one person who's dealing with this at her agency. I don't know if anybody else is dealing with this, and I don't know who's online, maybe one or two. So I wanted to put this here. There's a link to guidance. These visuals we may come back to at some point if there's questions, but I wanted to make sure to mention it because in the world of rapid rehousing, it is new and it's a little complicated when it comes to HMIS.
And I do want to flag and tag on with that these overlapping enrollments are specific to the joint component identified program.
Yes, yes, yeah. In the back, in the back end of the database, those projects are tagged as joint component. So you'll know if you have that kind of funding. Are there any questions about this? Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure to include it. It's new and confusing. Locally, obviously, we have also initiatives around how do we come together as a community and all work under the same model of rapid rehousing. So I wanted to, we want to make sure to include that in the conversation. There's a link here to the most current document. I know that things are being revised currently, but the assumption is that there's progressive engagement with clients, with people experiencing homelessness who are enrolled in your rapid rehousing program, that the assistance doesn't go on forever, that you're checking in every 3 months, and there's the assumption that it sort of titrates down. That is what I know. There's more out there. There's more discussions happening. There's local learning communities that are getting together. Some of you may be involved in that. Some of you may be much more well-versed about the nuances of the conversations that are happening now about rapid rehousing models in our community. So I just wanted to give a nod to that here. And anything that we talk about that you're hearing related to some of the conversations that you may be a part of around the rapid rehousing model, just, yeah, let's talk about it, ask questions, and we'll see if we can get a resource for you. Locally, we also have the city of Seattle has some very specific outcomes that are expected and that they measure in their contracts. And they've built that into the program outcomes report that we'll reference later as well. Many of you are probably familiar with the program outcomes report. That report was updated the last few months. The rapid rehousing outcomes were updated the last few months. They are focused on the move-in rate and the average days to move in. So you may have contract monitors that are, if you have city-funded rapid rehousing projects, you may have contract monitors that are looking at this piece of the outcomes report, running it and asking you questions. The key thing, one of the key things that changed was how the move-in rate is calculated. And so this is just a screenshot of just that row of the report. One of the key things that changed was the denominator. So, it is obviously looking at how many people did you move in? How many client enrollments have a move-in date? That's how it calculates how many people did you move in. What it takes out of the denominator is if you haven't been working with a client long enough, that one would expect that you would have moved them in. So for the city of Seattle, they took out anybody who you hadn't been working with for 30 days. So from project start date up until 29 days, anybody who doesn't have a move-in date is not counted at all in this calculation. It's sort of, I think about it like the assumption is that's not enough time to have somebody moved in. You get credit if you did move them in. They're included. But if you haven't moved them in yet and there's no move-in date, they're not even looked at yet. So that's one way to think about how the move-in rate in this report was updated. And then there's the average number of days that it takes to move somebody in. The logic behind all of this is in the document, the guidance document that we have on our website for the outcomes report, which is basically tells you exactly what is getting calculated in every part of that report. So if there's any questions about that, we can go over that report with you, look at the logic together and see what you're seeing. I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, who's going to walk us through the sort of how-to from the beginning to the end of working with a client in HMIS for rapid rehousing.
So as Stacy mentioned, I'm going to talk about kind of the practical how to do things in HMIS aspect of rapid rehousing. One of the things we're going to start with, just because it's kind of how the flow starts, is we're going to talk about rapid rehousing and for data entry, kind of specifically posting units, what that should look like, and then how to process referrals and all of that. Key steps for posting units. We did, Stacy, has it been a year now that we did the full CEA training?
Yeah, over a year.
So we did a full training when the unit posting form changed about a year ago that went step by step, kind of how to fill that out, what that should look like. We've linked it here in this training. The key takeaway for rapid rehousing programs is when you are posting a unit, please, please, please make sure that you uniquely identify that posting, because when CEA goes to refer to a client to your program, that is all they see, that date and then the description. Just those two things is how they see to identify sending a client to that referral, right? Like they look at all the data in other places, but when they're actually physically referring a client, it's just those two fields that show up. So for rapid rehousing, if you have 4 openings at once, just number them 1, 2, 3, 4, so that they can identify which specific opening they're referring a client to. In regards to kind of timing for posting resources, this is the current request from CEA about timing. If you know a unit is coming up, the goal behind these times is so that they're posted and ready and can be pulled in time for case conferencing. So for family resources, the request is Tuesday by 3. For single adult and young adult resources, the request is Wednesday by 3. And please feel free to post units as soon as you know they're available. When you look at the unit posting forms, there's those 2 dates. One kind of defaults to today, and then one is the date that the resource is available. And when CEA does their analysis, they do look at both of those dates. So when a referral is made by CEA, they make a referral to a specific unit. That's where that date description comes into play. A referral is moved from the community queue to your pending tab, which when we have, towards the end of this, if we have time remaining, I will actually go in the system, but we also included screenshots in our presentation. So a referral is moved from the community queue to the pending tab. The pending tab is where you see referrals that are pending to your program. You should, as a program manager or a responsible staff, be receiving notifications from Clarity directly if someone is referred to your program. If that is not the case, and you should be getting those referrals, please shoot us an email or our help desk. I think both of the help desk is on the agenda, and then I have business cards in the back. Feel free to grab those. So if you're not getting notified directly by HMIS, and you should be, please reach out to us. Also, CEA will send you an email or send to the responsible staff an email when a client is referred to your program. And then as the agency, you find the referral, open it, acknowledge it, and then either enroll or deny, with the exception of SSVF. So when you're looking at where to find a referral, there's kind of 2 places. You can see, this is what for those of you who are processing coordinated entry referrals, this is what your pending tab looks like. And then if you're curious about a specific client, if they received a referral, this is what the referrals will look like on their history tab. So then agency expectations, if you're receiving referrals, the expectation is that you acknowledge that referral within 48 hours. So that's, for those of you who process referrals, that's the moving from pending to pending in process. Just acknowledging that you're trying to reach the client, that you've seen the referral, that you acknowledge that it's there. And then the expectation is that you enroll or deny as quickly as possible. And then to reach out to CEA if you notice that there's lack of contact information, if it's inaccurate or out of date, or if any other unexpected issues arise. And I am realizing that I forgot to put their email address on here, but they're cea@kingcounty.gov. If a referral is denied, agencies should make a determination as soon as possible. For those of you who process referrals, on that referral denial list, you'll see two groupings of denial reasons. One starts with all, and one starts with BOS, which is balance of state. Please do not use the balance of state ones. Those are reasons that are reserved specifically for the rest of Washington. Because the system is used statewide, that's one of the places where the list is the same in King County and in other counties that use HMIS. So for those that start with BOS, please do not use those. If in doubt, please contact CEA, and this is actually their website, their email address. And then always send back to the community queue, which is an option on the referral itself. It says, do you want to send back to the queue? Always say yes, unless the client is deceased or housed, with the exception of SSVF. So when you get notifications, they should go both to your Clarity inbox and to your email. So if you are not getting them, check your spam folder. If it's not in your spam folder and you should be getting them, again, please feel free to reach out to us. Notifications, like I said, are sent to the agency contact, who is the HMIS lead, the person who's identified as the program contact, and then the referral specialist will all get those notifications. Here's the question about what do I do if I've enrolled a client and they're still in my pending tab. So when you go to enroll a client, you will see on the enrollment itself this box. This is, it says there's one pending referral, and then I want to link, it says program placement is a result of referral provided by, and whoever sent it to you. This toggle, so if the client has a pending referral to your program, this toggle defaults to on. So you just leave it and hit enroll. If for some reason it doesn't connect in the way it should, or the person you're enrolling as head of household isn't the person who got the referral, but it's still the same household, please feel free to reach out to our help desk and they can retroactively connect that referral to that enrollment. The way you can tell if an enrollment is connected to a referral is it has this little, when you're looking at a client's history, it has this little link icon. And if you hover over it, it will tell you referred by blah, 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 blah. So if you have people that are chilling on your pending tab that shouldn't be, that are referred, please send a list to the help desk of the client unique IDs. I think program name would be helpful, so that then they can connect the referral to the enrollment. But in theory, when you go to enroll a client, you should see both of these things, this orange box here, and then this toggle that I highlighted in red. So those should be present when you go to enroll a client as a result of a referral. And if they're not, please let me know, and I will help dig a little further. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would add and say most of the times when we see that happens, it is sequencing, like you've already started working with the client and they're enrolled, and then CEA says, oh, I was going to make that referral, and so then they make the referral after the fact. So then it won't automatically link. Like you said, the wrong head of household, you think it's this person is the head of household, they referred this person, so it doesn't link. Or you enroll a kid by accident as the head of household. Most of the time those, or sometimes we've had people reach out because they have, they're actually in HMIS, they're going to serve the client under this particular project in HMIS, and so they've enrolled, but CEA referred to this particular project. For those of you who have multiple rapid rehousing programs based on funding sources, that can sometimes, there's been some confusions around that. So usually we can work that out on the back end, relink everything, move enrollments over, do that kind of stuff. So always just reach out if you find yourself in those.
And one thing I will say is that this toggle is something that you can change, you can physically untoggle it. So that has happened occasionally as well, where you just physically untoggle it. enrollment management and move-in date. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about program start versus move-in date. The distinction between program start and move-in date is that program start is when the client is engaged, right? You've reached out to them, they've started working with you. This is kind of the next step after the referral, right? The referral comes to you, you reach out to the client, you have your intake. That intake is kind of your program project start date. That's their enrollment start date. The move-in date is when they have physically moved into housing. When you look at your enrollment screen, you'll see both. You'll see project start date and move-in date. Move-in date can be entered currently on the enrollment screen, the enter screen, on a status or annual assessment, or on the exit screen. That field is in all of those places. Starting October 1, it will only be on your enrollment screen. So October 1, 2019 is when the new HUD data standards come. And this is part of that, is that the move-in date will only be on that one place. So if you have a client come, you do their enrollment, a month later they move into housing, you open up their enrollment screen and enter that move-in date. Currently, you can do it that way, or you can do a status update or an annual assessment with that move-in date. One thing we wanted to make sure that we talk about is if you have a client who is exiting your program and you have not entered a move-in date on either the enrollment screen or the status assessment screen, if they're exiting their permanent housing and their move-in date coincides with their exit, no problem. If they don't have move-in dates on either their enrollment screen or their status assessment screen, and you get to the exit screen and you realize that you forgot to enter their move-in date, but it was 3 months ago, but they're actually exiting to an emergency shelter, you'll need to go back and do a status assessment with the move-in date. And this is tied specifically to those jurisdiction fields. Because if you backdate the move-in date on the exit screen, that jurisdiction field doesn't pop up in the same way that it will on the enrollment screen or on the status assessment screen.
It's complicated, and it'll be much easier when this move-in date is just in one place, just on the. So the issue is that the jurisdiction is captured when the person moves in, but on the exit screen, it is captured only when that exit destination is permanent, a permanent location. So if they are exiting to a shelter, but you did actually house them for 3 months, you would lose where the location that you housed them if you only entered it on that last screen. That's why the issue. It won't be as complicated in a few months.
If you enter the move-in date on the enrollment screen or the status assessment screen, it will still show up on the exit screen.
Yeah.
The concern that we're talking about is if the exit screen is the only place it shows up. Multiple move-in dates. So you have a client you're working with, they get enrolled in your program, they move into housing, they lose that housing, but they're still enrolled in your rapid rehousing program. What do you do? Guidance is, if I have a client who is enrolled in my rapid rehousing program, they're homeless here and they have a move-in date, and then they lose housing, if they do not go immediately into a new unit, right? So if they move from one unit to another, no problem. If they lose housing and they are experiencing homelessness again, but are still enrolled in your rapid rehousing program, when they lose housing, that first rapid rehousing project enrollment should be ended, and a new rapid rehousing project should start again. So that when that person has housing again, you've captured both move-in dates. So you don't want to go back into that original one and delete the move-in date. You want to make sure that you've captured both move-in dates.
This is an issue that comes up all the time. We have questions all the time about, oh, should I just delete the move-in date? Absolutely not. Never delete a move-in date. If you move somebody in and that was a true move-in date, you never want to change that. Also, what was referenced on the slide earlier is move-in dates need to be after the project start date. So that's the data out, that's a strict data standard, is move-in dates are in between a project start date and a project end date in thinking about a data entry project enrollment.
And they can be the same day as the
Yes,
program start date?
absolutely. Move-in date and project start date can be the same. In some cases, that is what happens. This comes up a lot, especially as it relates to chronic homelessness, because if you delete that move-in date, the client is not going to have a true history of homelessness in the system. And if you don't end your project and they really are in a shelter for a month, that's not going to count in the calculation of whether they were chronically homeless over time. So it's really it's there to, and those are the kind of things that get looked at and pulled from the database. That's why the data standards are what they are, so that you get an accurate representation of somebody's house status versus their time experiencing homelessness.
Annual assessments. So if you have a client who is enrolled in a rapid rehousing program for more than 365 days, they need an annual assessment. The annual assessment is the same information essentially that's on your enrollment screen. So when you go to do an annual assessment, it's often just a matter of skimming the information on the enrollment screen or whatever your most recent annual assessment was or status update, and making sure that information is still accurate and then hitting save. For the purposes of reporting, the annual assessment must be within a 60-day window, and it needs to be either the 30 days before the anniversary of their project start, not their move-in date, but their project start, or 30 days after. So it needs to be within that 60-day window in order to be pulled in reports like the APR. And here's some screenshots. So when you are working with a client, there's two different places where you will see the ability to do an annual assessment. When you are in their enrollment, you'll see this assessments here, and you should see status and annual. Make sure if you're doing an annual assessment, make sure that it is the annual assessment, because the reports won't pull it if it's just a status update. So if you're doing a status update for a move-in date, that can be this status update here. But if it is specifically that annual assessment, it must be this one, even if you do a status update within that 60-day window, reports still won't pull that because it has to specifically be this one that's flagged as the annual assessment. So this is when you're in the client's enrollment, and then when you're on the client's enrollment page over to the right, kind of towards the bottom, you'll see this status assessments, and it will list any past ones. If you click on this ad here, it will give you this option to add either a status assessment or an annual assessment. If you're working with a household with more than one member, make sure that you've toggled on all of the members. So you go through the assessment for each member. Demo time. One of the things I mentioned was the super importance of when you post a unit to make sure that you uniquely identify. So say I have this rapid rehousing opening. When I go to post the unit, this date field and this additional notes field are the two things that show up when CEA is looking at making a referral for a client to your program. So if you're posting multiple openings, please make sure you number each of those openings. For those of you who also do postings for like permanent housing, this can be your unit number or whatever is applicable for that as well. But rapid rehousing can just be kind of an arbitrary number, whatever makes sense to you. And then please fill out as much information as you have regarding all of these things. So then when CEA goes to the community queue and they find a client that they're going to refer to your program, they select your program, and then this is all that shows up, which is why it's super important. So if you have, say you have a single adult opening and a family opening, you can also identify it that way, right? Rapid rehousing, family. So then they actually know which opening they're referring the client to. So then when you receive a referral, it shows up here on your pending tab, making sure that you acknowledge your pending in process, and saving. One thing you'll notice when you're looking at your pending, there's actually a color difference between the clients that are pending in process and then the clients that are pending. Pending in process are green, pending will be white. So then say I've reached out to demo one, we've made contact, they've come in, they've done their intake. When I go to do my enrollment, I have this orange notification here saying there's a pending. Here's my toggle. I do have the ability to toggle it on and off, and then I enroll the client. And then when I go and I look at the client's program, this little link here is the thing that shows me that that enrollment was in fact connected to that referral. Questions in the room? Questions online?
Aside from move-in dates and house details, is there any service information we need to enter throughout their enrollment?
That is a good question. Rapid rehousing as a project type does not have a standard set of services that goes with it, but that doesn't mean that your local funding requirements don't require a standard set of services. So some rapid rehousing projects do have services because the county or the city or whatever said, we want all of these rapid rehousing projects to have these services. But it doesn't happen automatically. So, usually we'll set them up and we'll say, let us know if there's any services needed. So yeah, that is one of the ones that it varies.
Okay, reports. This report is a super interesting report. This is the referral stats report, and you can run it for all of the referrals that have come into your program. And this will show you, this is a quick look at how many total referrals, if you have any pending in process, completed referrals. If you're doing any data analysis around denied referrals, we'll show you that. And then within the program itself, it does a breakdown of pending in process, accepted, and denied. So then you can look kind of by program as well. So this is a really interesting report. We did a report spotlight on it, which will give you more details about it. And like Stacy mentioned earlier, when we send out the PDF of the slides, it'll go to everyone who has registered, and these links will be live links. So you should be able to just click on it and it'll open up for you. Program roster, this is the one that we had alluded to a little bit earlier. This report is super helpful for a lot of reasons. And this is kind of the primary report that I refer people to. It shows you a bunch of things. One thing it'll show you is if you have a household that is enrolled incorrectly. So these two individuals here on the bottom, you can tell are enrolled as a household because there isn't a dividing line between the two of them. So these two people are in a household. These two people on top are not, but you can tell by their ages that they probably should be, or that this demo one definitely belongs in a household somewhere with someone because they're 0 years old. So that's one thing that you can tell by just glancing at the roster. Another thing you can tell is if they have a move-in date, it will be listed on this report. So undefined means that they don't have one yet, and then it'll give you the move-in date, no matter what screen you've entered it on. So if it's from the enter screen or the status update screen, it will list that for you. When you're looking here, this is a little bit to the assessments question. So this length of stay is from the project start date. This assessment refers specifically to annual or status assessments. It's not like the VI SPDAT assessment. It refers specifically to annual or status. So if they're here at 360 some days and they have 0 assessments, they probably need one.
I will point out, so that is a good way to eyeball the assessments. And as Danielle was saying, one of the biggest issues that if you have different staff entering data that comes up is that baby and mom might be connected at the global household level, but then they'll get enrolled separately. And now this database is counting 3 households that are being served. Even though one of them's a baby, they're in their own household, they're in their own enrollment, they're not in a group enrollment. And so that is something we see constantly.
Yeah.
If that happens, some people think that just by ending that enrollment and doing it right, that'll sort of cancel it out. But then it just shows that you have this extra baby household that you've served forever. Contact us and we'll delete it. Don't worry about it. It happens all the time. Just reach out to the help desk and say, hey, can you delete this enrollment? Yeah. This is what happened.
Can you merge this household?
Yes, you can also, we can merge them. There's some things we can do. Just don't leave it.
Yeah.
Then we'll come to you anyways about it at some point because we will notice those things in our reports.
Yeah. And when you reach out to our help desk, please just use that unique identifier, and program name is always helpful as well for them to help kind of identify. One other thing thing that's really nice is that this report has drill down. So if you click on the client, I think name and unique identifier, it will take you to their page. So if you see something you want to double check, this is kind of a handy way to do that too. Seattle, King County Program Outcomes Report. We have a very, very, very in-depth guide on how this report is measured, where it pulls information from, what specifically in the enrollment it's looking at. It has been updated recently. The rapid rehousing measures have been updated. And then for those of you who work with City of Seattle funded diversion programs or services, those are also part of this report now. The report is super handy in that it also has drill down. So if you see a number and you're trying to figure out who it's counting, if you click on that number, it will pull up a new tab for you that will give you the list of the clients it's looking at. So HMIS data quality report and the APR. So the HMIS data quality report is a good place to start if you're curious about the data quality for your programs. We do also have a guide available on our website for both the data quality report and the APR that will take you through measure by measure exactly what it is measuring. Both of these were built based on HUD specifications. So these are HUD reports. HUD basically says, this is what I want the report to be. So HMIS data quality and the APR, the first part of the APR and the data quality report kind of mirror each other. So the APR has, that first section is also about data quality. The APR is a really great report. It's like 20 pages long. And we did a training just on the APR last year. And the link is available here on these slides. We went through all 20 pages of the report. It was very informative.
Yeah, some of you have to pull APRs and upload them and report them to funders, but some of you don't. And even if you don't, you can use and run this report for just your own joy.
Yeah. And then both of these reports also have drill down. So if you're looking at a number and you're trying to figure out who exactly it's talking about, if you click on that number, it should give you a list of the people that it's looking at. Any other questions about any of the things?
All right.
All right.
We're here if you have any specific questions about your agency or program. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.